The night was quiet, and the stars above looked endless. A lone man walked through the dark forest, his boots pressing against strange, alien soil. He was not supposed to be here, but curiosity had led him far from his ship. Everything around him felt alive. Every tree glowed faintly. Every shadow moved in the wind. As he pushed through the thick branches, he saw smoke rising in the distance. The smoke was not natural. It was black and heavy, the kind that came from burning metal. His heart beat faster. He followed the trail, and soon the trees opened into a clearing. There, in the middle, was the wreck of a small ship, torn apart, glowing faintly with dying energy. He stepped closer, carefully. The air smelled of fire and strange chemicals. The wrecked ship was alien. Its surface was smooth like glass and shaped like flowing water. Suddenly, he heard a sound, a weak cry, soft but filled with fear. He turned his head, and his eyes widened. Beside the wreckage, half hidden under broken panels, was a girl. Her skin shimmered faintly with silver light. Her eyes were large and bright, unlike anything human. She was beautiful yet strange, her body trembling with pain and fear. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and she collapsed back to the ground. The man rushed to her side, his instincts stronger than his fear. She looked at him with wide eyes, as if unsure whether he was friend or enemy. He raised his hand slowly, showing he had no weapon. "I will not hurt you," he whispered, though he knew she might not understand. The alien girl winced, holding her arm. Blood, or something like it, dripped onto the dirt. The color was not red but glowing blue, sparkling under the night sky. He tore a piece of cloth from his shirt and pressed it against her wound. She flinched at first, but then her eyes softened. Strange sounds escaped her lips. Her language was unlike anything he had heard. But her eyes spoke louder than her words. They were eyes of someone afraid and alone. He nodded, trying to comfort her, pointing to himself and saying, "Human," then pointing at her, waiting for a response. She whispered something faint, her voice fragile, but he could not understand. Still, he felt the meaning. She was asking for help. Around them, the forest was not safe. Distant roars echoed through the trees. The man knew predators were near, drawn by the fire and blood. Without hesitation, he lifted her gently into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her skin faintly warm with energy. She clutched at his shirt, her breathing heavy, her eyes never leaving his face. He carried her away from the wreck, deeper into the forest, searching for shelter. The night grew darker, and the sounds of strange creatures grew louder. Shadows moved between the glowing trees, and sharp eyes flashed in the dark. He found a small cave at the base of a cliff, hidden from the open sky. Inside, he laid her down carefully, his heart still racing. He lit a small fire with his survival kit, the flames dancing against the stone walls. The alien girl stared at the fire with wide eyes, perhaps never having seen it before. She whispered again, her words soft like music, though he could not understand. Her hand reached toward the warmth, trembling. The man offered her water from his flask. She hesitated, then drank slowly. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, a gesture he understood well. For a moment, there was peace, just the sound of crackling fire and her quiet breathing. But outside, something moved. Heavy footsteps echoed in the night. The man froze, listening, his hand reaching for the knife at his belt. The alien girl's eyes widened, as if she knew the danger too. A shadow passed by the cave's entrance, large and slow, sniffing the air. The fire flickered, and silence returned, but the threat remained. He looked at the girl. She looked back at him, trust slowly building between them. He knew this was only the beginning. Saving her would not be simple. The wreckage still glowed faintly in the distance, sending signals into the sky. Signals that someone, or something, would soon answer. The man's heart pounded as he realized the truth. By saving this alien girl, he had already stepped into a story far bigger than himself. The night was not just about survival anymore. It was the start of something that would change his life forever. The cave was small, but it felt safer than the open forest. The man sat near the fire, watching the flames dance while the alien girl lay on the ground, her silver skin glowing faintly in the light. She breathed slowly, her body weak but her eyes still sharp. Every time the fire cracked, she flinched, as if the sound reminded her of something frightening. He spoke softly, even though he knew she would not understand. "Don't worry, you're safe here," he said, his voice low and calm. She tilted her head, her large eyes blinking as if trying to read his meaning. Her lips moved, forming words in her strange language, but they carried more emotion than sense. He pointed to himself and said, "Human," again his voice steady. Then he tapped his chest, repeating the words slowly, "Human." She watched him for a long moment, then raised her hand weakly, pointing to herself. Her voice came out soft, almost broken, "Liara." The man froze, realizing this must be her name. He nodded quickly, repeating, "Liara," and pointing at her. For the first time, her lips curved into a small smile. The simple exchange created a bridge between two worlds. Her wound still bled faintly, the glowing blue liquid soaking into the cloth he had tied. He tightened it gently, and she hissed in pain, her body shaking. But she did not push him away. Instead, she let her hand rest on his arm for balance. The warmth of her touch sent a strange shiver through him, reminding him that she was alive, fragile, and real. The man gave her more water, holding the flask carefully to her lips. She drank slowly, her throat moving as she swallowed. Afterward, she whispered something in her language, her eyes soft with gratitude. Though he could not understand the words, he understood the meaning. Outside the cave, the night was restless. Strange calls echoed through the forest. The man fed the fire, its glow pushing back the darkness. But Liara's gaze kept drifting to the entrance, her body tense. It was as if she feared more than just wild creatures, as if something else was searching for her. He tried to lighten the moment, pulling a small ration bar from his pack. He broke it in half and handed a piece to her. At first, she hesitated, staring at the strange food. But then hunger won, and she took it carefully, nibbling like a cautious bird. Her face twisted at the strange taste, and she almost spat it out. The man chuckled softly, shaking his head. She frowned, not understanding, but then her eyes softened again, and she gave a small laugh of her own. The sound was light and musical, a sound that made the cave feel warmer. Hours passed slowly, the fire dimming, the forest never silent. The man leaned back against the cold stone wall, exhaustion pulling at him. Liara shifted closer, her body trembling with cold. Without words, he draped his jacket over her, and she pulled it tight around herself. Her eyes met his again, and this time there was no fear. Instead, there was trust, fragile but growing. She reached out with her glowing hand, touching his chest where his heart beat. Her lips moved, forming a single sound, soft and hesitant, safe. The man's eyes widened, his breath catching. She had spoken in his language, even if it was only one word. Her voice carried the weight of belief, as if she truly trusted him now. The silence that followed was filled with meaning, deeper than any words could carry. Then, suddenly, a sharp sound echoed outside the cave. Not the growl of an animal, not the whisper of wind, but something mechanical. The man tensed, his hand reaching for his knife. Liara's face went pale, her eyes wide with terror. She whispered quickly in her language, her voice urgent. Her trembling hand pointed upward toward the sky. The man followed her gaze, his heart pounding. Through the small opening of the cave, he saw faint lights moving among the stars. They were not stars at all, but ships, searching. The beams of scanning drones swept over the forest, cutting through the night like blades of light. Liara clutched his arm, her nails digging into his skin. Her whole body shook, and he realized she feared them more than the predators outside. He pulled her close, lowering her body against the cave wall. He placed a finger on his lips, signaling her to stay silent. The beams of light moved closer, passing over the wreck in the distance. The wreck's faint glow pulsed in response, as if calling to them. The man's breath came slow and controlled, every muscle tight. He knew that whoever those ships belonged to, they were not just searching the forest. They were searching for her. And if they found her, they would not leave him alive. The lights moved on, drifting away into the forest. For now, they were safe, but the danger had only just begun. Liara looked at him with wide, desperate eyes, whispering her one human word again. Safe, she said, but this time her voice was filled with fear, as if she was begging him. I'll make it true. The man tightened his grip on his knife and looked out into the night. He knew he could not abandon her. Not now. She trusted him, and somehow he felt the same toward her. But deep down, he also knew this trust would cost him more than he ever imagined. The night outside the cave grew heavier, the forest alive with whispers and distant roars. The man did not sleep, his eyes fixed on the shifting glow beyond the entrance. Liara rested near the fire, her breathing uneven. Every now and then she whispered words in her alien tongue, as if calling for someone, or perhaps warning herself not to give in to fear. He wanted to tell her it was fine, that she was safe, but even he did not believe it fully. The faint lights in the sky had not vanished. They moved in slow circles, scanning the land. Each time a beam of white light cut across the trees, the man's heart tightened. He knew they were looking for the wreck, but the truth was clearer now. They were looking for her. Whoever controlled those ships wanted Liara back, but from her trembling, he could tell she did not want to be found. The man whispered softly, pointing at the lights above, "Them, your people." She shook her head quickly, her silver hair catching the fire's glow. Her eyes widened with terror as she spoke hurriedly in her language. Though he did not understand the words, the fear in her voice was enough to tell him. Those were not friends. Suddenly, the night broke with a high-pitched hum. A drone descended through the trees, its single red eye scanning, its metal body clicking with strange movements. The man pulled Liara close, pushing her deeper into the shadows of the cave. He held her mouth gently, telling her without words to stay silent. The drone hovered near the wreck, its light falling on the twisted metal. The ship responded with a faint pulse, sending a signal skyward. Liara's eyes filled with dread, her lips moving soundlessly. She gripped his arm with surprising strength, as if begging him to do something, anything. The man reached for a rock beside him, his fingers tightening. He waited as the drone drifted closer, scanning the forest floor. When it came near the cave, he hurled the rock with all his force. It struck the ground a few meters away, the noise echoing through the trees. The drone jerked, its red eye turning toward the sound. It drifted away from the cave, scanning the false trail. The man exhaled slowly, his heart hammering. But Liara's body still shook, her trust in him fighting against her deep fear. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, the drone rose back into the sky, its hum fading into the distance. The beams of light soon pulled away, leaving the forest dark once again. But the silence did not bring comfort. It only deepened the question of who was hunting her. The fire burned low, shadows stretching across the stone walls. Liara looked at him, her large eyes shimmering. She touched his chest again, the place where his heart beat, and whispered one word in his language, "Safe." This time, though, her voice cracked, as if she did not fully believe her own word. The man hesitated, then nodded firmly. "Safe," he repeated. He knew he could not promise it, but he had to make her believe it. Her lips trembled into the smallest of smiles, but her eyes remained haunted. It was clear that shadows from her past followed her even here. To distract her, he pulled a small object from his pack, a silver lighter. He flicked it open, the tiny flame dancing in the air. Liara gasped softly, her eyes reflecting the light, her hand reaching forward with childlike wonder. She whispered something soft in her own tongue, as if naming the flame. He let her hold the lighter, guiding her hands. The warmth lit her face, and for a moment she looked almost human, almost free of fear. But then a thunderous sound rolled across the night. The ground shook, and in the distance, trees cracked under heavy weight. Liara froze, her eyes wide with recognition. She whispered quickly, her voice trembling, repeating the same word again and again. The man listened carefully, and though he could not understand, one thing was clear. The enemy was here, moving closer. The sky glowed faintly once more, this time brighter, larger ships moving above the forest like silent predators. He stood quickly, gripping his knife, his breath sharp. Liara grabbed his hand, holding tight, her eyes begging him not to leave the cave. But he knew hiding forever was impossible. The forest was alive with danger. The wreck still pulsed with signals, and now more shadows had descended. If they stayed, they would be found. If they moved, they risked running straight into whatever hunted her. The man looked at Liara, her fragile form wrapped in his jacket, her silver skin glowing in the dim firelight. He had saved her once, but this was more than survival now. She trusted him completely, her life in his hands. And in that moment, he swore silently that he would not let her down. Above them, the shadows in the sky grew larger, circling like vultures. And deep in his heart, the man knew this night was only the beginning. The real danger was still waiting. Just beyond the stars, the forest was restless. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound carried weight. The man tightened his grip on his knife, but he knew a blade would mean little against ships in the sky. Liara's eyes never left him, wide and filled with fear, her hand clinging to his sleeve as if she believed only he could keep her alive. The fire inside the cave had dimmed to a weak glow, its warmth fading, yet neither of them dared to step outside. Hours passed like heavy chains, until the first light of dawn painted the forest in silver. The scanning beams were gone. The drones had vanished, but the wreckage still glowed faintly in the clearing, sending silent calls into the sky. Liara kept whispering to herself, her words sharp and trembling, and though he could not understand, he felt her fear pressing into him. At last, he gestured to her, pointing toward the wreck, then to her arm where her wound still leaked faint light. She shook her head violently, whispering, "No, no," in her own tongue. But then her voice softened, and she touched the broken communicator lying near her belt. It was a small device, cracked and sparking faintly, its surface glowing with alien symbols. The man understood her meaning. If they could repair it, maybe she could call for help. Help she trusted, not the hunters in the sky. He examined the device, frowning at the strange circuits. It was unlike any human technology, smooth and flowing instead of sharp and mechanical. Still, he pulled out his own small toolkit, wires and tools he carried from his ship, and began working slowly. Liara watched with tense hope, her silver eyes never leaving his hands. Every spark made her flinch. Every hum of energy made her hold her breath. Finally, after what felt like hours, the device pulsed with faint light. Liara gasped, her lips parting with wonder. She touched the communicator and spoke quickly in her language, her voice sharp and filled with urgency. The device flickered, then a sound filled the cave, a deep voice layered with static. It was alien, heavy, yet full of power. Liara's eyes filled with tears. She answered in a rush, her words flowing like a desperate song. The man could not follow, but he understood from her trembling shoulders that this voice was important. He leaned closer, but the voice changed, sharper now, filled with suspicion. The communicator crackled with words he could not know, but the tone made his blood chill. Liara turned, looking at him with pleading eyes, then back to the device. Her voice grew louder, her tone protective, as if she were defending him. The voice responded, angry, demanding. The cave seemed smaller under its weight. Then, Without warning, the device projected a faint image, a towering alien figure with eyes that burned like fire. The figure's gaze locked onto the man, and even though it was only a projection, he felt the weight of judgment pressing into his chest. The alien spoke, its words sharp and slow. But even without translation, the meaning was clear. Why was a human with her? Why was a human touching their blood? The man's throat tightened, but he stood firm, his hand resting lightly on the knife at his side, not in threat, but in defiance. Liara shouted back at the projection. Her voice breaking, she pointed at the man, then at herself. Her words were like shields, thrown against the anger of the voice. Finally, the image flickered and faded, leaving only silence and the soft hum of the communicator. Liara's chest heaved, her face pale, but her eyes shone with fierce determination. She whispered softly, the only human word she knew, "Safe," pointing at him. For the first time, he realized she was not only asking for safety, she was promising it. She was standing against her own kind, against the weight of her family or her people because she trusted him. The man felt a strange warmth in his chest, stronger than fear. But the silence did not last. The ground trembled, a low rumble spreading through the forest. Outside, the light dimmed as something vast passed over the trees. The man and Liara rushed to the entrance of the cave, their eyes widening at the sight. Above the wreck, a massive ship descended, its shadow swallowing the clearing. The wreckage pulsed brightly now, as if answering the call of its master. The ship's surface shimmered like liquid metal, symbols glowing across its hull. The sound of engines roared, shaking the ground like thunder. Liara gasped, whispering in her tongue, her voice filled with both hope and dread. Her eyes locked onto the ship, then turned to him, filled with unspoken questions. Was this salvation or capture? The man's jaw tightened, his heart pounding, as he realized the truth. This rescue was not simple, it was already complicated. The girl's family or people had come, and they did not trust him. And yet, without him, Liara would not have survived the night. The man clenched his fists, knowing he was no longer just a bystander. He was part of her story now, whether her people liked it or not. And as the ship lowered into the clearing, its doors beginning to open, he knew everything was about to change. The ground shook as the alien ship settled into the clearing, its shadow swallowing the wreckage. The man stood at the cave entrance, his knife still in his hand, though he knew it was useless against something so large. Liara pressed close to him, her silver skin glowing faintly in the morning light, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. The ship's hull shimmered like water, and strange symbols flowed across its surface as if the vessel itself was alive. With a hiss, the ship opened, a ramp extending to the ground. The air filled with a heavy hum, and figures began to emerge, tall and radiant, their bodies glowing with the same silver light as Liara's. They were her people, unmistakably powerful, their movements graceful yet heavy with authority. Each step they took made the man feel smaller, weaker, yet he did not move away. Liara gasped softly, whispering in her language, her voice trembling. She stumbled forward a step, then stopped, looking back at him, as if torn between the family she knew and the human who had saved her. The tallest figure stepped forward, their eyes burning like white fire, their face sharp and ageless. They looked at Liara first, then their gaze shifted to the man, and the air seemed to grow colder. More of them descended, surrounding the clearing, their eyes sharp with suspicion. The man felt their judgment press against him, though none of them spoke a human word. He tightened his grip on the knife, his heart pounding, but he did not step back. If they wanted him gone, they would have to face his defiance. Liara cried out suddenly, her voice strong despite her trembling. She spoke quickly in her tongue, pointing at the man, then pressing her hand over her heart. Her words were fast, desperate, filled with emotion. The aliens froze, their glowing eyes narrowing as they listened. One of them answered in a deep voice that rumbled like thunder. The tone was sharp, demanding, as if asking why she was protecting him. Liara's response was fierce, louder this time. She stepped in front of the man, spreading her arms as if shielding him from her own people. The man's breath caught, realizing she was fighting for him, against those who should have been her protectors. The tall leader raised their hand, and the others fell silent, their gaze fixed on the human, heavy with calculation. The communicator at Liara's side glowed faintly, repeating her earlier words, translating only a single fragment into broken human speech. The deep voice came through, clear enough for him to understand. "You've saved her." The man nodded slowly, his voice steady. "Yes, I saved her." For a moment, silence stretched across the clearing, broken only by the hum of the ship. Then the leader stepped closer, towering above him, their silver light casting long shadows. The man stood his ground, refusing to lower his eyes. Liara's hands trembled as she reached for his arm, her voice soft now, pleading with her family. The leader spoke again, their tone heavy and absolute, their words carrying more weight than any threat. The communicator translated, the broken human words echoing in the air. Then, "You come with us." The man stiffened, his jaw tightening, his mind racing. This was not an invitation. It was a command, a demand that he leave his world behind. Liara's eyes filled with both relief and fear. She whispered quickly in her tongue, her voice softer than before. Her gaze met his, and though he could not understand the words, the meaning was clear. She wanted him to agree. The other aliens formed a circle around them, their glowing eyes watching closely. The wreckage pulsed faintly, answering the great ship above, as if the entire forest now bent to their presence. The man's heart pounded, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. If he stepped onto that ship, nothing in his life would ever be the same. The leader turned, motioning for Liara and the human to follow. The other aliens stepped aside, creating a path toward the ramp. Liara clutched his arm tightly, her body trembling, but her eyes shining with hope. The man hesitated only a moment, then took his first step forward. The air grew heavier as they approached the ship. The humming sound wrapped around them, vibrating through his bones. Liara whispered softly in his ear, the only human word she knew, "Safe." But this time, it sounded more like a question than a promise. At the edge of the ramp, the man stopped, looking back at the forest one last time. The life he had known, the freedom of his world, it all lay behind him now. Ahead was something unknown, something vast and dangerous, yet also filled with a strange possibility. With a deep breath, he stepped onto the ramp beside Liara. The aliens closed in behind them, their glowing eyes watching every move. The leader spoke again, their voice low but absolute. The communicator translated, the words cutting through the air, "Human, chosen." The man's chest tightened, realizing he was no longer just a rescuer. He was part of their story now, whether he wanted it or not. The alien ship swallowed them in silence as the ramp closed, sealing away the forest and the wreck. Inside, the air shimmered with soft light, the walls alive with flowing symbols that pulsed like veins. The man looked around carefully, his knife still in his belt though it felt useless in this place. Liara clung to his arm, her silver eyes watching every movement of her people, her face pale but determined. The aliens surrounded them, tall figures whose presence filled the chamber with weight. None spoke at first, but their glowing eyes burned into him, measuring his worth. The leader stepped forward, their silver aura brighter than the others, their gaze sharp and unyielding. Liara tightened her grip on his sleeve, her body trembling, yet she stood tall beside him. The leader spoke in their tongue, a low rumble that echoed across the walls. The communicator at Liara's side flickered, struggling to shape the alien words into human speech. The translation came broken, but the meaning struck him like a storm. "You saved our blood, you bind it now." The man's brows furrowed, his hand tightening at his side. "What do you mean?" he whispered, though his voice felt small in the vast chamber. Liara gasped softly, her eyes darting between him and her family. She began speaking quickly, her tone urgent, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. The leader raised a hand, silencing her, then stepped closer. Their towering form loomed over the human, their voice heavier now. Again the communicator struggled, its words stuttering but clear enough. "Human, you saved her. You take role, protector, mate." The man's chest tightened, his breath caught in disbelief. He looked at Liara, her face flushed, her silver skin glowing brighter. She lowered her eyes, her fingers twisting the fabric of his jacket, as if torn between shame and longing. It was no misunderstanding. By their law, saving her life meant more than gratitude. It meant a bond. The aliens murmured among themselves, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Some nodded, as if this was natural. Others frowned with suspicion. Liara spoke again, her voice sharp, her tone protective as she pointed at him. Her words fell like a shield, her entire body standing between him and their judgment. The leader turned their gaze back to the man, the silence heavy. Then they spoke again, the communicator flashing, the words forming with clarity this time. "You are chosen, her life, your life, you become son of our line." The man's heart pounded, his mind racing. He had saved her out of instinct, out of humanity, not expecting any reward. Now he was being told that his act had changed everything. They were not offering him thanks. They were binding him into their family, into their blood. Liara looked up at him then, her silver eyes shimmering with tears. Her lips parted, but she spoke only one human word, soft as a whisper. "Please." The sound tore through him more than any demand. It was not just her family pressing him, it was her asking him to accept. He turned away for a moment, his fists clenched, his chest heavy. How could he become part of something so vast, so alien? Yet when he looked back, when he saw her fragile form trembling but still standing strong, he felt the weight of his choice. She trusted him with her life, and now she was offering him a place beside her. The leader raised their hand again, the chamber falling silent. Their eyes burned with finality as the words came through the communicator. "Accept or refuse, but if refuse, her bond breaks, she falls to shame." The man froze, the truth striking him like a blade. This was not only about him, it was about her future, her honor, her very place among her people. If he walked away, she would suffer for it, branded by her family as broken. If he accepted, he would no longer be only human. He would be bound to her forever. Liara stepped closer, her hand trembling as she touched his chest where his heart beat. Her eyes met his, shimmering with hope and fear. She whispered softly again, her voice fragile, "Safe." But this time it was not a promise, it was a plea. The man exhaled slowly, his heart torn, his voice quiet but steady. "I accept. On one condition," he said, his eyes locking onto the leaders. The aliens shifted, their glowing gazes narrowing. The communicator pulsed, repeating his words in broken form. "Accept but condition." The leader tilted their head, their expression unreadable. The man straightened his shoulders, his voice firm. "I remain human, always human." Silence filled the chamber, heavy and endless. Then, slowly, the leader's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. The communicator flickered once more, translating with a whisper that echoed across the ship. "Then humanity joins our family." Liara gasped softly, tears filling her silver eyes, her hand gripping his tightly. The man's heart pounded as the weight of what had just happened settled into him. He was no longer just a rescuer, no longer just a wanderer on alien soil. He was bound, chosen, accepted into a family not of Earth. And though fear still lingered in his chest, he felt something else too, a spark of hope, strange and unfamiliar, but powerful. Perhaps this was not the end of his story, but the beginning, The chamber was silent after his words, the weight of his condition echoing in the glowing walls. Liara's family stood tall around him, their silver light pulsing like stars, their faces unreadable. For a moment it felt as if the entire ship held its breath, waiting for the leader's response. Then, slowly, the leader stepped forward, their aura shimmering brighter, their voice deep and final. "You remain human, but you are bound." The communicator translated, its broken voice trembling through the air. The man's chest tightened, his choice no longer a possibility, but a reality. Liara gasped softly, her silver eyes flooding with tears that shimmered like crystals. She pressed her forehead against his arm, whispering the only word she knew in his tongue, "Safe." The other aliens murmured, their voices like distant thunder, some nodding, others frowning. The leader raised a hand, silencing them, then motioned for Liara and the man to step forward. Together, they walked toward the center of the chamber, the floor glowing beneath their feet. Strange symbols lit up, spiraling outward in waves of silver light, wrapping them both in a circle of energy. The man felt warmth flow over his skin, not painful, but heavy with meaning. Liara's body trembled beside him, yet she held his hand tightly, her face filled with quiet strength. The leader spoke again, their words clear as the communicator echoed them. "By saving her blood, you share her future. By choosing her life, you choose our family." The chamber shook softly, the light around them rising higher. The man stood still, his jaw set, knowing he could not turn back. He glanced at Liara, and for the first time she smiled fully, a smile filled with hope. In her eyes he saw trust, gratitude, and something deeper, something he could not name. When the light faded, silence returned. The aliens lowered their heads slightly, a gesture of respect or perhaps recognition. The leaders stepped closer, their eyes burning as they spoke one final time. "You are now son of our line, human no more alone." The words struck him harder than any blade. He had been a wanderer, a man drifting far from home, but now he was tied to something vast, something alien, yet strangely welcoming. Liara's hand squeezed his, her voice trembling as she whispered again, "Safe, with me." The man nodded slowly, his heart heavy but steady. The ship shifted, rising from the forest floor, leaving the wreck behind. Through a glowing window, he saw the trees grow smaller, the world beneath fading. The stars opened wide before them, endless and brilliant. He realized then that Earth, his home, was far behind, and ahead lay a path he could not have imagined. Liara leaned against him, her body still weak, but her spirit strong. Her family surrounded them, their glowing forms like guardians. Some still watched him with suspicion, others with quiet acceptance. But none moved to push him away. He was now part of their blood. The leader approached one final time, their voice softer than before. "You are protector. You are mate. You are human son-in-law," the communicator translated. The words sounded strange, almost too human for such beings, yet they carried the weight of destiny. The man straightened his shoulders, his voice calm. "I will protect her always." Liara's smile deepened, her tears falling like silver drops. She whispered one last word, not in human tongue, but in her own. Though he could not understand, the meaning filled his heart with warmth. It was a word of belonging, a word of love. The stars stretched out ahead, vast and endless. The man knew danger would come, challenges beyond anything he had faced before. But he also knew he would not face them alone. He had saved her life, and in return, she had given him a family. For the first time in his wandering life, he felt something he had never truly known. He was not just a human in an alien world. He was chosen, accepted, and bound. He was a human son-in-law to a family not of Earth, but of the stars. And his story had only just begun.